Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name is Ryan. Excited today because I get to try a full suite of, well, it's three out of the four. So there's this a distillery called Still Austin down in Texas. You probably heard of it, I'm imagining. Maybe you haven't. But Still Austin down in Texas, they're doing some great stuff. They're building a great reputation, and they continue to expand their product line as well. They have a great, like, 2-year-old cask strength bourbon. You might be like, 2 years, I'm out. Trust me, it's actually pretty freaking good. It's Texas heat. You know, they can't let it go cask strength for 5 years. It'd be syrup. But anyway, so they're working with their conditions. They're working with their climate. And I've had a lot of Texas whiskey at this point. I've had, Balcones and Iron Root. I've had lots of different Texas whiskeys. I have had some from Still Austin, but I haven't had these yet. This is their seasonal bottled and bond lineup. There are 4 whiskeys. The one that I don't have today is the rye. So these are all bottled in bond. They are released, one bottle drops every season. So summer, they kick it off with the red corn bottled in bond. And then in the fall, then they have the high rye bourbon. And then in the winter, it's the blue corn. And then the spring is the rye. So we have the 3 bourbons represented here. I'm going to try them. They all come in between 70 and like 80 bucks. I think the high rye is the $80 and the other 2 are like the 70, 75 area. But I wanted to dive into these and see how these fare compared to some of the other Texas whiskeys I've had. I've yet to have many Texas whiskeys that really blew me away. I think the Iron Root Harbinger Cigar Blend, which I had very recently, was very good. Admittedly, very good. But other than that, there's not a ton that really jump out at me. But I do like Still Austin and what they've got going on. And we're going to kick things off today by nosing and tasting the Red Corn Summer Release. So mash bill here is actually, it's interesting. 2 different corns in the mash. 36% is red corn. 34% is white corn. So together that makes, if your math is decent, 70%. And then the last 30 is 25% rye and 5% malted barley. And they use that same sort of formula in a number of their products where it's basically 70% corn, 25% rye, 5% malted barley. But in this one, we've got the corn is broken up into 2 different kinds. And one thing, before I start sharing nosing notes here, one thing that I think is important to call attention to is the way that they proof their whiskey down, right? This is bottled in bond, so it's obviously had water added to it to bring it down to 100 proof. But one of the things that they do is they actually put water into the barrel instead of draining the barrel and then adding water to proof it down exactly where they want it. Over time, they're actually adding water to the barrel itself. This is a practice that is used in like rum aging as well. But they're adding water to it so it doesn't get too thick and viscous and syrupy as it's evaporating there inside of the barrel. They want to continue to have enough volume inside the barrel that there's a lot of contact with the oak itself. And if you let it evaporate a bunch and the level in the barrel gets lower and lower and lower, you have less surface area of liquid wood. So if you add the water while it's having its evaporative loss, you keep bringing the level back up to this baseline that you want it at, and then you have a lot more oak contact. So we should be getting more sweet oak on this as opposed to some other Texas whiskeys that you may have had. On the nose, first thing I get hit with is that dusty corn. So not like cooked corn. It's the hard corn kernels that are scattered across the floor of a barn. You know what I mean? That sort of dusty corn quality. Very grained forward on the nose. But there's also this, I would say, rock candy kind of a sweetness. You know, those old-timey rock candies that you would get when we were kids. We'd go to museums or zoos, and they'd always have them in the gift store. We'd beg our parents for them because they were colorful and on a stick, and they looked cool. And then we tasted them, and we were like, this really isn't all that great, but I'm still happy I had it. It's like that candy sweetness, the rock candies. Nose actually reminds me a lot of like a bowl of jelly beans, but the old-timey style jelly beans. Not the new fancy Starburst ones. Those are delicious, don't get me wrong. But it's more like your old-fashioned ones where the flavors aren't big and potent and super fruity. You get more of like, there's black licorice in there, and there's just standard vanilla cream in there. A little bit of lemon and orange. It's those old-timey jelly beans sort of a note. Well, let's try it. Cheers. Ooh, very interesting sip. Right up front, I'm hit with a very grain-forward profile on the front end of the palate. That dusty corn settles in, almost like your autumn vibes, which is interesting because this is their summer release. but it's giving me the autumn vibes on this. But then into the late palate and then into the finish, that's where I get this wave of candy sweetness, that old-timey candy sweetness we were talking about. It's not a fruity sweetness, more like corn syrupy sweetness, you know what I mean? You ride a wave of that, and then on into the finish, I get this nice extended note of sweet seasoned oak. Yeah, not hyper complex, grain forward, candy sweetness, sweet seasoned oak on the end. And I want to say on that finish there, as it lingers, a little bit of like a orange peel, you know, zesty orange. All right, real talk, that's pretty good. I like that. Oh, I should note, this year's release is 5 years old. I like that a lot. Kind of wanted to sit with that for a minute. Moving on to the second one. This one is the fall release. Yes, fall release. This is the High Rye Bourbon. Got a little picture of a horsey on it. Now, it's interesting. I wonder if they rebranded this because it was being referred to as the High Rye Bourbon. But the rye count in this High Rye Bourbon is only 25%, which is, I mean, is that really high? I don't know that it is. I think that's sort of medium. Maybe it's above average, slightly above average, but I don't know that I'd call it high rye. But then this year on their website, it's just labeled as straight bourbon whiskey. So I wonder if they dropped the high rye label for some reason. Either way, the mash bill on this is 70% white corn, 25% rye, 5% malted barley. So it's basically the same thing we just had, except they dropped that 36% red corn and just substituted the rest of it back in white corn. So now it's all white corn. So this is the same thing we just had, but lacking the influence of the red corn. On the nose, I get hit with what makes me think of those rye chips and Chex Mix. I think toasted almonds and even a little bit of white chocolate. Let's try it. Cheers. It is fairly grain forward at the front, like the last one was, but it's a different kind of a grain. We were getting that dusty corn on the red corn one. This one, it's more like rye bread, that sort of a grainy note. But then on the tail end of that palate, into the mid palate, it starts to transition to this sort of, I almost think like a lemon bar. And I love lemon bars. Sweet with a little bit of a lemon zest sort of a vibe in there. There's also that kind of savory pastry layer underneath it all. And it's kind of a grain sandwich because that grain note does come back on the finish. I get it up front and I get it at the end. Not as much sweet seasoned oak on the finish of this. It's more of like a white peppercorn, sort of a spice. A little bit of that white chocolate note because it's kind of sweet in there. And then a lot of that grain note on the finish as well. I mean, I like that too. I think that's pretty good too. Neither of these have been bad at all. I don't have any complaints about them so far. I like really grain forward profiles, and some craft distilleries really full send on it. You know, I think of places like Rock Filter that full sends on that grain forward note. This is grain forward, but it tries to balance it out with some more traditional bourbon notes, with some seasoned oak, and with some more sweetness as well. Moving on to the third, this one's the Blue Corn. This is our winter release. And the mash bill on this one is going to be a little bit different. So it comes in at 26% blue corn, 25% white corn. So that is 51% corn total. That's barely legal bourbon. Then you're looking at 44% rye, 5% malted barley. So a lot of rye. This is not the high rye label. The other one was considered the high rye. This one has a ton more rye in it than the last one did. And I can tell you on the nose, I can tell. A little bit of wintergreen mint. Think of honey on biscuits. I even want to say like golden delicious apples on the nose as well. Let's try it. Cheers. This one more than the others I think kind of fits into that wintry role. It kind of fits its seasonal release time. If you've ever had baklava, you know, it's like nuts and honey and flaky dough. This reminds me of baklava on the palate. Lots of honey, a little bit nutty, but it's also carrying this really herbal note late into the palate and then into the finish. Somewhat even medicinal, but also sweet at the same time. Yeah, that herbal note is sort of underneath everything and then it rises up in the finish and becomes sort of the star. Okay, so if I'm going to think about how I would rank these together, my favorite to my least favorite, I'm going to revisit these real quick, just to solidify though, real quick, before I say anything. Yep. All right, here's where I'm at. It's literally left to right for you guys. First one we had the red corn. I like that one the most. I just think it had the most distinct character. You know, of the three, I liked all of these, but that one to me stands out the most as something I would say like, hey, yeah, that's got some nice grain forward notes. It's not standard corn. You can tell there's something a little bit different going on with it. It leans into it, but it also has a lot of balance. Where it's bringing some good traditional bourbon notes. You know, we had that nice seasoned sweet oak and a little bit of that orange zest on the finish, but up front we were getting these old-timey candy notes, alongside that grain-forward red corn note. All that worked together in good cohesion, and I liked it the most. Then in second place would be the what they're maybe calling the high rye, maybe not calling high rye, but their straight bourbon whiskey, bottled in bond, 70% white corn. That one again was not overly complex, but had good bounce to it. Really enjoyed that sip. And the blue corn, I felt like it was hard to pick out anything that might be different about the corn profile because there was so much rye in the sip. And I like rye. I'm obviously a big rye whiskey fan, but I just felt like it lacked a more cohesive sense of identity than the others. Not that it was bad. I think that is a pretty decent pour, but if I'm going to be paying, $75 for it, I probably want it to have some sort of a clear sense of identity. But anyways, the red corn. This one's my favorite. I like this quite a bit, actually. I would be very happy to have a bottle of this on my own shelf. This one specifically, if I'm going to give it a score per my scale, I think I'm going to land at a 7.3. Has a great sense of identity. I think that if you had the opportunity to try it, you probably ought to. And it's really clinging to the glass too. There's like big droplets just sort of chilling on there. And they're not running down either. They're sort of just hanging out. You see them just hanging out there? It's kind of wild. Anyways, I like it. Big shout out to DMC, by the way, who shared his bottles with me. I appreciate that. It's harder for me to find their releases like this up in Michigan because A, I don't think they ship to Michigan, and B, the only place in Michigan that you can get Still Austin stuff is Total Wine, so you would only get it when they shelved it. But anyways, thanks for sharing them with me. I really enjoyed these pours. Hey, big shout out to our Patreon supporters. Really looking forward to our virtual bottle share. I think everybody sent all their samples out, so we're just waiting on us to all get what's still out there in the mail, and then we'll pick a day, we'll sit down together and start cruising through these things. It'll probably be a several night process because I think there's 12 of us, so we're not going to cruise through 12 whiskeys in one night because that would kill me. I would die. So I think we're probably gonna have to divvy up across at least 3 nights. But I'm really looking forward to it. That's extra time we get to hang out together, spend together. It's sort of like a show and tell. Like, here's my bottle. I hope you enjoy it, and talk about why you like it or why you picked it. So that'll be cool. And it's all craft distillery stuff this time around. We did impressive bottles, last time, but this time around it's hey, pick something local to you. So we were trying stuff. We got people in like every corner of the states. So that's pretty cool. We got people on the East Coast, Midwest, Southwest, Pacific Northwest. We're everywhere. This is great. So that'll be fun. Hey, cheers, my friends. May you live richly and get better with age, and hope to catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.